Hello, Till and Flora, the stage is yours. You're mute, Till.
So here we go. We just thought about a opening, let's say, idea of what we are going to talk about today. So let me, if that's possible, show you a little meme that an investor from Munich posted a couple of days ago. I'm checking if I can share here. Oh, that looks weird. Maybe I can't. Geht nicht, oder?
In the center, there's freigeben, and you can share the screen. Everyone has right to share the screen.
Damn handy. Okay, it's actually a meme that shows. I can show you like this. That shows the idea of what is the difference between a first-time founder and you could say second-time founder or serial entrepreneur. And it looks a little like this. This is blurry. It doesn't work. So there is a guy on a mountain climbing up his first time, and he's very scared and trying to hug the mountain and everything. And on the other side, there's somebody who looks like basically he grew up on the mountain and he's absolutely comfortable in an extremely challenging situation. So maybe we could reframe the topic area of today. What is the gap between these two characters? What's the gap between somebody who is in a very challenging, potentially even dangerous or frightening environment, and somebody who is in the same environment but feels very comfortable, or maybe at least souverain, whatever that's in English? That could be a framing for what we want to talk about today, because eventually, I guess what's interesting for you guys here as the audience today could be, what are the formats, what are the topic areas, what are the skills eventually, which make the person on the left side at some point the person on the right side? Is that what everybody agrees we want to talk about today? Please feel free to chime in. We want to make this as interactive as possible today. So the more you share your thoughts and bring in ideas, what we should be talking about, the better for everybody.
So I think from an entrepreneurship educator perspective, of course, there are the skills and competences on the operational side. For example, business modeling, how to test and validate your business model. I would like to exclude that and would love to ask you to focus on the emotional and self-managing part in, for example, when you have a business model and you go testing and you're running against the wall and you have to pivot, it probably sucks a lot. I see that here, how to deal with these elements. So can we narrow it down to this?
Yeah, sure.
I guess we have actually made that split before in the preparation. We thought of something like more of a toolbox perspective on the topic, and the other one being more a personality and emotional side, as you just described it. We're not going to touch the typical, you could say, university type toolbox of how to run a business, what are the elements from business model to fundraising and exit. It's more about toolbox for an entrepreneur in the sense of how can I prepare myself, how do I run my business, and I still believe there's an element of toolboxing which is relevant even for you guys in the academia, because that's what's probably most easy to emulate or to find formats to help students understand the key learnings in that. So the other side being a bit more soft skills, personality-related skills, are more in the field, as you described, of life design and emotional perspective.
And that is actually why we would love to make this a conversation, because it's really hard to get these things across, right? So me being a first-time founder, Till being a serial founder, we know that there are differences. They mainly come from experience, because if you have experience building a company once, you know about the things that you would want to do differently personality-wise, but it's really hard to teach them. So we would love also to hear your thoughts on how you can get that across to students.
Absolutely. So maybe to get kicked off, if we follow a typical life cycle model of a company, it looks a little like this. I mean, people who have read Lou Adler in HR, okay, difficult.
Wait, let me fix that.
You fix that.
Yes.
So there is a early stage where it's all about basically making the first step. It's fighting your procrastination. A lot of people who I met as founders, the one difference between them and all the other people who said I could found a company too is that they did it. So massive difference. It looks small, but it is a massive difference between these people. And the next stage, you are in a phase where you build a company, you gain traction, something develops. And it can be very dynamic, and it can be an ever-changing environment where life and your business and the world around you changes, not in years, not in months, sometimes within days. And then there is a stage where everything kind of normalizes, where it's more about managing something that you have built. And as of Lou Adler, these are actually three completely different types of people to manage these phases, because if you are the person who makes the first step, it doesn't mean that you're the right person to actually build the company that you have just invented. So if we start in this early stage, we figured what are the topics that come up to founders in the early stage, sometimes before they even found a company. What is the toolbox element of what do you need to do to get started? And on the other hand, what's the thing that you might want to prepare yourself for? So in this topic, maybe let's start with the more, as you mentioned, Bettina, the more life design topics in here. So as we all know, there is a large difference between the US idea of what the startup journey is and Germany, and also you find different people. And I guess one of the most important topics is how do you set yourself up? What is it that you should be doing maybe even before you enter into the rocket ship, before you sit on the rocket ship and lift off? One of the topics we found very important is around understanding that your startup venture is a chapter of your life and not your life. Maybe you want to elaborate on this, because you came up with a point and I think it's super interesting.
Yes, because actually I started my company right out of university. So I did a few internships to find out what I didn't want to do. And then I found people and a topic that I wanted to work on. And it just naturally became a startup. So I didn't set out to say, okay, I want to be an entrepreneur. What is my topic? The topic came to me, the right people came to me, and I started building a company. And I've been doing that for the last almost 3 years. And in the beginning, it was very much my life. So I just worked all the time. This topic just became what everyone asked me. Like, people don't ask me about like how I am. It's like, how is your company doing? And this very much becomes your identity. And just recently, I started switching perspective on what do I do if the startup fails, which is very likely. Doesn't my whole identity crush? Then who am I if the startup goes away? And switching perspective on this, and very much intentionally deciding that it is just one of the paths I'm taking. And if it ends, that's fine, because I've built a network. I've built so much more around that topic that allows me to also think about other paths that I can take in the future. This switch of perspective has helped me to overcome that challenge of not making the startup my whole identity, making it something that I work on constantly, making it something that is in my brain constantly to progress, but not making it my whole identity.
And I think Flora just said something super interesting. And this is, if you look at it from a more, let's say, more experienced point of view, looking backwards, it's all about the assets you develop, right? So what you just mentioned, the network I built, it's one of the most important and one of the most valuable assets that you gain in a stage or in a life cycle stage of building your startup. So I was in deep tech. I co-founded a deep tech company in computer vision with Professor Kramer from the TU University, who's one of the globally leading professors in computer vision. And all of a sudden, I became a deep tech guy. And I have networked with people who are like 20 times smarter than me. It's easy, but people who write papers and who have a background of I don't know how many years in research, and who do things just a few hundred people on the planet can do. And that's something that now when I see how other companies, other startups, I'm also working with startups more in a mentoring role on different platforms, who I see they obviously don't have. It's an incredibly valuable asset. So you could say in terms of life design, if you enter a stage of, or if you enter a life cycle stage where you want to build a startup, if you make yourself aware that you are building assets which stay with you, even if that startup is not successful, that can be a very good setup, also helping people to understand what to invest in. Because if you just think building a startup means working 16 hours or 20 hours a day, you're anyway wrong. Your professor failed to teach you what entrepreneurship is all about. But also, if you then understand that investing into network, investing into skills, investing into leadership skills, investing into, I don't know, talent tribes that you can leverage for the next startup, is something where you not completely lose everything when the startup fails, but you're taking these assets with you into your next venture. I guess that's a super helpful perspective to set people up for a more, how can I say, maybe not relaxed, but a more long-term and sustainable mindset around founding a company. Does that make sense? Any questions on this topic? Come on, speak up, share your ideas and views and questions.
So there are some entrepreneurial people in the call. So Barbara, my partner in crime for this channel, has a company called Panorama Wolf. So besides her job at the university, she runs this company. Caroline is a student in entrepreneurship, but she's running the NGO Impact Week. And so what I would like to ask you is, what are the concrete struggles of an entrepreneur, of an early first-time entrepreneur, but I also think also a serial entrepreneur? He might know the paths and do's and don'ts on the operational side better, but probably still struggles. And what have been your lessons learned regarding managing your personal struggles? And based on the lessons learned, what should be in the toolbox to prepare students to better face these struggles? These, I also put it in the chat. That would be my questions to you, Till and Flora, but also Caroline and Barbara.
So I think in the beginning, something that I see a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with, especially as first-time founders, is finding co-founders that they want to work with. I've been in a very, very happy position to have found my co-founders during my studies. And this is something I think people in academia can really facilitate and recreate for other people, because I found my co-founders during my studies in an interdisciplinary study program. So I have a background in business and AI, and my co-founders have a background in computer science and mathematics. So I found technical people to work with, which is something that a lot of people with a business background struggle to find. And there are lots of matching events where people try to find co-founders, not in a natural setting, but kind of in an artificial setting. And from my perspective, it works really well if you have worked with people before in, I would say, like university projects, just in a setting which is not designed to build a startup, but just designed to build trust and to build a connection that you then can leverage to build a business. And I think this is something I've been fortunate with, but it's something that could be part of a toolbox to use your time in university to look up, if you want to found a startup, if you have a topic you want to work on, to already start looking for people that bring a skill set that is complementary to what you know, and then to build a connection with them so you don't have to start with random strangers, and trust them to have the same commitment and to have the same energy to really end up building a company together.
Yes, and can we focus more on the personality elements? Because founder matching is a part of our curricula and our activities already, anytime. But what our hypothesis is that often the really young students, they do not know themselves. And they are these hipster, hustler, and hacker idea in mind, and looking to identify people who have complementary skills, but they do not understand with whom they are really able to bond and to work also when it's very stressful. Is this also your experience, and what would be your advice here?
I think the most important part is to work with other people on projects that are not your startup. So I've attended, I think, at least 5 hackathons to work in different settings just to find out, are there ideas out there that other people bring to the table that I can contribute to? University projects where I just worked on a random research question and I started noticing, okay, these are people I really have a good working connection with. And when I then found my idea to found a startup, these were the first people in my mind I went back to say, okay, I want to approach them and ask them if they want to be a part of it. So this is not particularly a personality thing, but I think you can set an environment where this collaboration can happen. So then people have a network, again, coming back to the network, that they can leverage to go back to and say, okay, I know some people I've worked with that not only bring the skill set, but also the same energy and the same. Yeah.
From my point of view, maybe as a best practice, and that totally builds on what Flora said, on what can be put in place and maybe potentially even part of a curriculum in academia. For example, I studied architecture and we were kind of forced to study 2 terms, something completely different, like Monty Python would call it. So I studied philosophy and I was reading Kierkegaard, which has probably impressed me more than all the rest of architecture for the rest of my life. But going back to what we were just talking about, I have made very good experiences with really getting super close. There is a beautiful quote from one of my favorite actors who said, if you want to find out if you're ready to marry somebody, you can shorten the whole process down to 1 week. Just go on a camping vacation without your cell phones and you will know. You can actually get married right after that week. And that's what I've actually literally done. All the co-founders I've been later founding a business with, I've invited them to live with me for weeks, sometimes even more, at least for working together on projects which were not necessarily the first chapter of the startup, but were somewhat general topics that connected us in order to find out who I'm dealing with. Because one of the things that I also want to point out, which is something that could or maybe should become part of the academic curriculum, is you always hear that diversity matters. You always hear that co-founders have to be complementary, ideally also from a personality perspective, because the mini-me problem has been discovered as something challenging, as something that confines your potential. On the other hand, if you have once been in a situation with a truly diverse team, you find out It's absolute hell if you don't know how to manage diversity, because it means you have a car with 4 wheels going in 4 different directions. If you don't have an engine, something in between that actually leverages the strength and the beauty in diversity. So managing diversity is something which is an absolutely foundational skill if you really want to have that complementary, diverse setup for your startup. And potentially it's something that might be worth looking at from a perspective of academia.
I have a question to that. Where would you see the responsibility for this? In one single person actually managing the team? Do you see it in the structures that you build? Or is everyone kind of responsible for managing this diversity?
My experience is at least one person has to know what they're doing, because if you take it on intuitively, you are going to hell. So one person has to be knowledgeable about it and has to know formats. Leadership, eventually, that's one of my key learnings in my business life, only happens in formats. Leadership is not just there because you're there, right? If you don't talk, if you don't do anything together, there is no leadership. So the formats really define how your leadership materializes, what happens to people, how people connect, and what type of relationships start to exist. So I guess there has to be one person who understands about the formats you have to use, and also who understands about the basic value set you need to be able to manage diversity. So what's the problem in a mini-me situation? There is reasons for that, and they are very much coming from a super anthropological perspective, right? So how do people, humans, sorry, how do they operate in a situation where everybody is the same? And what happens when people are different? So people are scared of things they don't understand. And what are the natural reactions to that? How can you set up values as a corporate culture, as a value set that you all basically type of agree upon in order to make it work? And then it is the good old 3-point rule of leadership. You define the rules, you live upon the rules, and you hold others responsible. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, thank you.
Cool.
And especially about the values part, this is something that was really interesting for our company. So we had a project with Deutsche Bahn, you might know them, like the railway operator in Germany. And they just randomly had a session on values. And it was just 1 hour with a random guy from the Netherlands. And we came up with our core values. And to this day, with 19 people, we still have these core values. And we try to incorporate that into every team meeting that we have as all hands. And we weren't taught that before, but there would have been a chance to really develop this early on, and it was just in this random project. So I think this is a really important thing to teach people about core values and how they also define how you grow your team and people you get on board in order to build the team early on that really can.
Maybe to add on this, values as an element of culture and leadership have the same challenge. They don't materialize if there's no formats, how you bring them into your everyday business life. So eventually, if you work with people in the kind of startups that we most likely all are, it's the 3 things you do is you communicate with each other, you treat each other in some way, and you take decisions. That's all you do. You don't, juggle or do crazy circus stuff. It's the 3 things you do. So how do you get values to become part of communication, decision-taking, and how you treat each other, your culture? And that's not easy. A lot of companies fail by putting it on a nice poster on the wall, mainly in corporate environments. Everybody looks at it and says, that makes a lot of sense, and that's it. You have to find very specifically defined formats how a value actually happens when you communicate, take decisions, or treat each other. So let me take an example here. One of the things that challenges a lot of companies, eventually kills a lot of companies, is your culture for conflict. So the strongest in terms of values and culture company I was happy to work with was LinkedIn, and we had super clear values connected to that. So the number one values was members first. Whenever you had a conflict, you had to come back and sit down and say, our kingdom fight apart, what is actually best for our members? And then there were other values like relationships matter. So don't write any CC email, call the person. And then there were very specific leadership formats like the 5-day principle, or another one called something escalation, where you instantly, after you identify your conflict, find out who's the person who can eventually decide what to do, and then directly go there. And there's a rule in 5 days it has to be resolved. And there's a rule, no CC emails. If you do this, this can save your company 50% of the time people spend on email, because they just use save my ass behaviors in conflicts. So formats for values, super important. And one of the elements, going back to where we came from, is if you want to install a value set that helps you manage diversity, it also has to happen in formats. Okay, so the next thing, when we go back to the before you start and how can you set up yourself for the venture, thing that we thought of was, as Flora said, most startups fail. How do you prepare yourself? What do you think has to be done as an individual perspective in terms of life design to prepare yourself for the event of failure?
I think from my perspective, I had not a startup was a work element to have a backup strategy. So really very practical, where to sleep when I cannot afford housing anymore. What could be a short-term gig that I have a little money, or I also recognize for me having some saving untouched, that I have a minimal duration of time. That was in that case, because I had that once. So I was able to, as an adult in the 30s, to crash back in my childhood room with my mom, and have minimal income. So I don't know about the others. And that was a safety net. I always knew I can do that. And that helped me also to be cooler with the risk of failure.
Absolutely. I think that's you can't really quantify how helpful this is, because eventually it's like optimism. I value that my parents managed to give me the capability of being an optimist, typically, which is a privilege. Some people are not optimists, and that's a massive difference. And if you go into a venture like this and you have the feeling, I have something like a safety net, it's a different mindset with which you start into the venture. And it potentially gives you a bit more clearer view on a lot of decisions, other than standing back to the wall and having to fight for survival, whatever you do. It's probably not always the smartest decisions. But another perspective on the same topic that we discussed prior to the meeting was, how do you define points where you make sure there is a consequence when you reach them? A lot of people, I mean, we all suffer from hundreds of biases. Our brain is not the logical, linear, cognitive decision cockpit that it is most of the time misunderstood to be. We are so interfered by all kinds of emotional, intuitive, and also life stage specific biases, which constantly change how we evaluate and how we evaluate the situation we're in, and also how we see ourselves. So what I've seen, I have seen founders who I met when they were early stage and were super positive and super optimistic, and years later, their venture has not really made the progress. They are facing roadblocks which look like they cannot be overcome in their situation. And they're still struggling. They're ignoring the fact that, hey, I'm standing in front of a wall and I have no door. There is no door. I have no idea what to do. And they're just ignoring it. They continue to hustle their way against the wall all the time. And their energy is degenerating. And their biases are preventing them from understanding, hey, I should stop.
And I think it's really important to also reflect on the fact that it doesn't have to be an external reason that the startup fails. It's not like you always have to run out of money and then you're up against the wall and it ends because you don't have money left. It can also be your passion declining for it and you're forcing yourself to put in the hours, but it's not really moving forward because you don't feel the passion for the topic anymore. Or like you had your example from your friend, it's not about the money in there, but it's really not scaling. So you're just working in the zombie mode. So really being reflective on the fact, what are my cut-off moments rather than just money running out and having to shut down.
And that should be something, because of the fact that you don't see these moments, because of your biases, something that I don't know how to do it perfectly. I'm definitely myself a massive victim to this. So it's something where you need people around you. Because the biggest threat in all of, I think, these types of situations is I'm missing the English words, schleichende Veränderung, the minimal changes. If you gain 2 grams of body weight every day or 10 grams, you don't feel that you're gaining weight because you see yourself in the mirror every day and it looks like I'm the same I've ever been. A year later, you have gained a lot of weight and you didn't know why. All of a sudden, something's wrong. Your health is not right. You don't fit into an airplane seat anymore, whatever happens. And you have no idea what happened. That's the way crisis builds. And that's one of the reasons that a lot of people get into this situation that they don't understand it's over because they're feeling they're doing something every day. There's just, they're working on it. And the problem just increases in very, very small steps and they don't manage to see it. So you need people around you and you have to actually listen when they say, come on. I personally had these conversations. It's also important to be the person who gives this feedback. I've been in conversations with people where I said, hey, I see you you have all this gray hair, you lost all your positive energy. I am worried about you. Are you sure that you are objective about the situation of your venture? Are you sure that you are open to the fact that it could mean that the venture has failed and you should move on?
And oftentimes, this is people from outside of the startup bubble. So for me, I recently went on vacation with people who have nothing to do with startups. And honestly, this was some of the best decisions I've taken in a long time, because again, it's about perspective. These are people that know you maybe from your past before you started your venture, and they can tell you, man, you've really changed. And maybe it's time to reflect. Yeah. So it's really nice to build a network with other startup people because you have the same experiences and you can share some also of the pain and the hard work you put in, and it's really nice to be reflected in that. But it's also great advice to find people outside of the startup bubble that can kind of give you a reality check on this.
Here's a little interesting part of our program. Since we actually prepared for this talk over in a place next door and had food and drinks with it, we actually have to do a 1-minute bio break. How about you guys discuss what the next questions to this topic are to really give us a super interesting question to deal with next when we're back from the bio break. 30 seconds, okay? Really sorry.
I think we can use the time. What would be your questions to entrepreneurs when it comes to life design? Maybe we can collect the questions we have for them. I see Ingo already wondering, isn't it about developing a risk few situation? It's a good one. Yeah. Safety net. So maybe you have further questions to them.
Yeah, I wonder if it's also like a self-consciousness thing when you like you feel like it's not working or something, and but you put all your energy into this one project, and then you feel maybe like, okay, I cannot not succeed, and and this also has influence on your like decision making because you feel not valuable anymore or something in this direction. Like, how do you build confidence for yourself aside from the company you're building, that you can do the next thing if it's not going to work? I think this is quite an important thing, that you can dissolve between the company you're building and you as a person yourself. I think this
that you really know your net worth beyond the
exactly
success of the startup. That is a really good one. I also would like to ask them strategically what kind of resilient mechanism they have built up, where they have to had the need for resilience. What is resilience for them? What, when, and how they are dealing with that. And I had a conversation here, a panel discussion with entrepreneurs, and I confronted them with some data from a founder report. Here, Till. So there was a wonderful remark by Werner that one strategy would be that you are building up a confidence, or I rephrase it, I hope it's fine, that what is your capabilities beyond the startup? That you know who you are, what you can offer, that when the startup is failing, you still know what you are able to offer. There are a couple of questions and notes in the chat. Maybe you can read them. And I would like to ask you regarding resilience. What is your lessons learned regarding resilience? What is resilience for you? When was it needed in your founder journey? And how have you built up resilience or managed to be more resilient?
Okay, I have a picture that I use a lot. I find the conversation about resilience sometimes a little challenging because it feels like people make it a very simple model of you have to be fit to deal with external challenges. So, you know, your idea doesn't get the feedback, the resonance you want. People are not nice to you. Investors don't like you. The market hates you. Whatever happens, all the external challenges you're facing as an entrepreneur. My experience is a little different. I felt what I was personally struggling with the most, and what I felt is worth, let's say, preparing for the most is dealing with your internal challenges. I call it fighting your own demons. So I guess, and we're going to touch this also later in this session. There is an element of, you know, your mental situation. How are you feeling about what you do? Business is not PowerPoint or what I said before about the brain, a linear process that's all rational and and deterministic and whatsoever. It's human, right? This all business is people, and by that it's largely not logical, and it's completely infused by emotion and by where people are at in their lives and how they feel about themselves. And we all know this. If you're in your bed and you can't sleep and your carousel starts spinning, mainly with doubts about yourself, with concerns about, am I doing the right thing, with any type of I'm missing the English words here, negative emotion that you have received from the outside turning into actually your own narrative. And that's something that's extremely dangerous because it's a vicious circle that doesn't end and it doesn't provide any value. You cannot resolve it. The only thing you can do about it is stop it. So I guess one of the things to learn from my point of view is to make sure it doesn't happen, to prevent getting into this vicious circle, making sure you're not getting into the situation. So what do you do when you can't sleep? It's an actual challenge. It can be very physical. So my best practices is sit on your bike, do sports. So you're so tired, you will fall asleep anyway. Do something when you find out your head is going, your brain, your mind is going on the spin, force a change of perspective, whatever. Play cards, play a game until you fall asleep, read a book or whatsoever, but make sure that you're not allowing your internal demons to basically kill your energy. That's my personal view on resilience.
I have two things to add. So I think from what I've seen is that some people start a startup because they want to be an entrepreneur. So I call them lifestyle entrepreneurs because they see, like when I went to university, everyone wanted to become a strategy consultant. Before it was investment banking, now it's becoming a startup founder. So for me personally, I found the problem first within my family, and I'm just very, very passionate about solving that problem. And that gives me a resilience compared to people who just want to build a startup. That I also don't like the term resilience, but I just have more energy, more motivation, and a really intrinsic wish to make this happen because I know what I'm doing it for. And it's not just to fulfill this idea of who I want to be to an outside world. So I think this is something that you can also maybe tell people. I don't know if it can be taught, but tell people in order to reality check, is this really something you want to do? Are you equipped to start this entrepreneurial journey? And then in terms of capability versus confidence, because I saw that as a comment in the chat, I think what has really helped me to look out in this journey of becoming a founder, look out for things that I can do well. Because every day, because it's something I did right out of university, but without having professional experience, every day I have so many things that I'm doing for the first time and I haven't been taught to do. And it's really something I'm just figuring out on my own. And then people give me feedback on, you're really good at public speaking. So this is something that I try to remember, and I try to build something from that is not just my startup. So I've started to take some public speaking gigs to become something of a keynote speaker, to just have in mind that this is something I know how to do well and that I can carry forward. Even though my startup fails, I have a network, I can build upon that, I can practice that while I'm a founder anyways, because I'm the one pitching the startup all the time. So identifying these capabilities that you have naturally, and then thinking about how they can be beneficial long-term and how you can practice them while you build your startup and everyone benefits.
Very good remark. So in this panel we had here, what we hear, of course, that we recognize in some ambitious students that it needs to be in the CV to found a company, and it's a kind of a lifestyle, besides included in the list of Forbes 30 under 30. What a remark a founder made in this panel, and I think this is really, really important, also what you said, Flora, that a founder understands work-life balance. The first 3 to 4 years, or 3 to 5 years, forget it. It needs focus and determination and probably all the power you have, and there is not so much other things. Do you see that the same?
Do you?
Come on. I would disagree in a sense of how to formulate it, because work-life balance sounds like work-life balance comes from a time where work and life were two different things. One of my favorite statements here from Richard Branson is work life, play hard, work hard is an old concept. It's not the right perspective to look at what we do today, because it's both part of the same thing, and that's called life. I've always seen it like this. And I guess there is so many ways to measure that situation, because what Flora said a little earlier in the session, if you start your venture and you're totally immersed into it, you love everything about it, you don't have the wish to switch it off and do something completely different, even though sometimes it might be healthy or maybe even not. So it's your life. It can even become your identity. So if that is all good, if there is a positive emotional situation you're in, it's the wrong way to measure it, work life, because it could be, everything could be seen work, even though you're just loving life at its best, because it's your baby, it's the thing you're absolutely passionate about. And like Warren Buffett said, you're tap dancing to your office. So I guess we have to rephrase this model. And it's not work and life, it's the stressful part. It's the element of energy you have to invest into something that you have to come up with, right? It's energy that you have to get from somewhere. And then there's other elements in your life where that energy might be coming from. Maybe that's the way to look at it, because if you just invest energy all the time, you only have as much energy in your glass as that glass holds. And if you share it, if you pour it somewhere, it's gone. And you have to manage that glass, and you have to make sure there's something coming back into the glass. So I'm not absolutely sure if it's really still the right way to think of work-life balance, but if we look at how much energy, how much focus you need, and how little time and focus might be left for other things, then that's an absolutely relevant perspective. So one of the things, for example, that I've always put into my list was you have to have a somewhat stable setup in your family or relationship life, that you know it's okay to be so massively focused with all of my energy into my venture. If you know from the beginning, I have a partner who expects me to be there 50% of my time, or who wants to do this and that and this and that and this and that, all these activities, that could become an issue that has the potential to kill your business. If you feel you are not yourself anymore because you drop everything else that you used to do, your friends, all kinds of social environments, communities that you've been part of, your sport, your physical health, then this is again a massive risk to the survival of your company and to your own survival. So I call it more, it's a battle for energy and focus rather than work and life.
And I would like to circle back to the lifestyle model, because I think in the beginning, building a prototype, evaluating things, that gives so much energy and is so much fun that you don't want to think about other things like working out or like meeting your friends. This becomes less important because it's just so fulfilling. But once the company scales, and this is something I'm experiencing currently, you become more of a person that takes care of the really, really big, hairy problems that are more on the legal or administrative side or have to do with people. So the role really switches. And this is when, for me, it's really relaxing to take a 3-week vacation, prepare it really well, but then communicate to everyone that I need time to switch off and to just experience something else and like refresh my brain to be able to be this firefighter again that my scaling company needs. So I think this also very much depends on the phase of the company, and is again something that can be taught. Thinking about, am I the right person for the life cycle stage of my company, and this is something that gives me energy, or maybe it's time to move on and build something new from scratch.
Yeah, so what I recognized in a conversation I had with a founder on this context of resilience, he also purposely said he was not aware of that, of his limits, and he actively has to build up a different strategy, that weekends are off, that he sleeps, that he has one day, no emails, no phone, digital detox. So he created his own strategy. I think when something is turmoiling, he also might need to flip, and sleep might be also difficult. So we have 6 minutes. Maybe you can scan. There was another comment from Ingo. Maybe you would like to add on that. And my final question to you, toolbox. What needs to be in as a summary? So team, value, failure preparation, maybe also self-awareness, skills for resilience. What else?
Let me jump on this last point, self-awareness of who you are. What Flora just said, you might be the right person to start a company, but you might be absolutely not the right person for the next stage when it's about leading people or doing stuff that is not just ideation and starting something and having a great idea.
So, yes, and you see that in Google with Sergey Brin and Larry Page, and then came Eric Schmidt. You had Zuckerberg and then Sheryl Sandberg. You see these kind of early ramp-up founders and kind of the mature CEOs type of thing. Yeah, good one.
This can start very early on. A lot of the situation in many first funding rounds is that once the first funding round is closed, the investors are working on replacing founders, because they know, okay, this person was great to start or to come up with the idea, to make the first steps, to find the first cool people, or to build a product, research whatsoever. But so many times these product people are not the right ones to scale a business, because the only thing they care about is their baby, their product. And in that sense, it's also super important to be mindful of who you are, and when it's time to step out of your current role and maybe hire somebody who's a better fit for that. I mean, we're talking most of the time when you start a company, your founder, your CEO, something C-level, but maybe in an even early stage of the company, it's the right step to move into a different role and to bring somebody else into your own role. This is the old A player hire A player and B player hire C player problem, right? So make sure you find people who are better than yourself for what you're doing and what's the next challenge for your company. I think that's in there. The question of Ingo on thinking of different approaches you can take to building a company. There are so many, and they're highly depending on where you are as a founder. So Flora is all in right after university, very free to do whatever she wants. In my latest venture, I was not able to really dedicate all of my time. And also the networks that or the founder group that I pulled together were interestingly all in similar situations. Super senior people with incredible networks, but not 100% available. So that's a different setup. And it can have a dramatic impact on how you then build the company, because you have a different set of resources, you have other opportunities, and by that, the plan for executing and building is very likely different from what happens when you found right after university.
Flora, anything to add regarding the toolbox?
Well, sorry.
I would like to add one more point, because it also says in your question, Ingo, venture capital versus built on the side versus bootstrap. I think it's really important to teach people on how the mechanics of VCs work. And I think this is talked about so many times. I see it on my newsfeed on LinkedIn at least once a day, but still it is so important to teach people how this is really a make or break bet, and that you have to know once you take on VCs that you're also risking your own baby to just be put money in and then take it to the moon, and potentially it doesn't reach the moon and then it's dead. And to really have this in your mind, and to know before you sign up, not just because you need money, but because you are aware of this big bet versus bootstrapping and then building a sustainable business step by step.
Maybe two more things to add. Clearly, leadership is something that you don't learn from books. It would be great if it's possible, but it's not. It's like riding a bicycle. But there can be, just like good sales training is the same thing. You can learn it in role plays. And that's something, there is formats, even for the world of academia, where you come up with setups that work. And the last thing that's super crucial for startup founders is network. And networking is something most founders get wrong. It's not about screaming into your LinkedIn group, I need something. It's about, giving and taking. It's about building relationships rather than reach. And that's also something that, obviously, network theory is a scientific field that could be maybe a little more, could become part of the toolbox.
So we're coming to the end. I want to be respectful of your time. Is there anything we can do for you in return for your time and all your insights? Is there something you are looking for right now?
A beer?
You will get it from me, you and Flora. I would definitely invite you, and will inform the people in Munich who would like to meet you in person. So final, because Caroline is student/founder, but most of us are educator. What is your final recommendation to us? And then we're closing. Or wish, expectation, something for future founders.
I think the most important thing for future founders is to have a network of sparring partners, people who have done it before and who can answer questions. And this is something I want to especially recommend Till for if you know someone who is starting a company and who wants to talk to someone really experienced, he's the perfect guy. So make sure to connect to him afterwards and to recommend him.
Yes, and I would like to add on that because Till is not just very experienced and successful. He has also a certain attitude to people where, he likes people, and when he says something critical, not in order to make someone small, but really, really help him. Because we had a conversation that the startup ecosystem is, from some perspective, very male dominated. And I'm afraid that the tone is getting also in the direction of Elon. And I see the energy, and to avoid toxic people. There is a wonderful book by Bob Sutton, The No Asshole Rule. So avoid assholes.
That's what happens when you were the generation before that wanted to become consultants. That was very difficult to avoid assholes, but I must say my no asshole policy also started very early in my career, and I think it's one of the best decisions to take, because eventually that plays with what we said earlier. It's not work and life, and it's life, right? It's all your life. So decide what you want to do with your time. You want to spend it with assholes for the sake of money, or for the sake of power, or for the sake of whatever type of image? Or do you want to make it quality time where you learn, where you enjoy your even your work time with your colleagues? And that, to me, is the best decision can be taken.
Wonderful. That is a wonderful final word. So drinks on me for the next time. I thanks the speaker. Till and Flora, wonderful. And I wish you all a wonderful evening. The lineup for the next call is already distributed. The next speaker in February is, let me sneak again. I wrote it down, but I don't have it in my, I think it's Radek, isn't it? On elderly people. So let me briefly look. In February, we have, just a second. My computer is dying. In February, we have, yes, we have Radek Orosch, life design for elderly, second life design, or for people above 50. And in March, we have Tara, who's in the call today, a mandatory life design course, building an innovative life design thinking DNA from the Taipei Medical University. So I wish you all a wonderful evening. For Tara, it's already very, very late in Taipei, and hopefully see you soon. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Bye. So.